Hello everybody and welcome to Nathan on Shuffle and to my latest episode here. This is a fun one, kind of a special year-end type show, part 1 of 2 that I'm doing to talk about my favorite albums of 2023. I listened to a ton of albums this year, probably more than I have in any year, I think, because I just got really excited about new music. Was part of this YouTube community that kept feeding me new albums to check out and look into, and I wanted to reciprocate by finding these hidden gems and sharing it with you guys and with my fellow YouTubers who we talk together and discuss albums together privately. So I've been really into new music this year. In fact, on the channel, I've talked about over 100 albums throughout the year in my various new album spotlights and in those mini review shows. I did one at the halfway mark of the year, 30 album recommendations for the first half of the year, and then I just recently did one for 25 album recommendations for the second half of the year. So those shows were a lot of fun to put together, but combining all that together, all these albums, I've talked about over 100 albums this year. So I've expanded my list a little bit here. Last year I talked through my top 40 albums, but this year I'm basically starting at 50 and moving my way up. So this show will talk about number 50 through 17 because I saved my top 16 for my big tournament style show that I'm going to be doing next. So you can look out for that next week. That should be a lot of fun as I try to decide which albums I preferred throughout the year and which one is ranked as my favorite album of 2023. But for now, we're going to talk about what you might call the honorable mentions, my albums ranked from 50 to 17 on my list. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly because I don't want this show to be forever long, and I went into great detail about them throughout my various reviews. I'll put links in the description below for my full-on reviews for each of these ones if you want to check out more about them. If you didn't check out my review throughout the year, that could be a good way to get more of my thoughts about it. But right now, I don't have any notes or anything in front of me. I'm just going down my list and talking off the top of my head, just a quick rundown of what I loved this year in music. So here we go, starting at number 50. Number 50 is Motorpsycho's Yay. I really loved this album. More than I thought I would, because I'm not a huge Motorpsycho person. I appreciate them. I believe their album from last year, Ancient Astronauts, was on my list somewhere. But this one was a bit more acoustic in flavor, and I liked that laid-back style. And there's a track, Hotel de Dallas, which I thought was just an amazing song, one of my favorite songs from the year. So I put this on the strength of that song and just the beauty of some of the more acoustic passages, and they just really impressed me with their album Yay. So that comes in at number 50. At 49, I recently talked about it, Squeaky Feet and the album Cause for Alarm. This is more in a jam band type style. It brings to mind a band like Humphreys McGee, but a bit more proggy perhaps, and these real extended sections going through a lot of different styles and a lot of different sounds, and it just really impressed me, their ability to play, their ability to really live in this soundscape and to have these cool fun jams that are just exciting to listen to. It's a pretty long album, there's a lot of lengthy pieces on it, but I had a lot of fun with it, so I think this deserves to be on my list. Number 48 is Hackberry and their album Breathing Space. This is an instrumental prog metal album, and it really harkens back to the prog metal that I loved back in like the early 2000s era, you know, the Porcupine Tree, the Opeth, that kind of stuff, instrumental only style, focuses just on the instruments and how they're playing and some really cool technical playing and ability, and just had a lot of fun with this one. There's 4 tracks. They all are pretty substantial, lengthy tracks, but you get through it pretty quickly. It breezes by, and it's just a blast to listen to with them performing this instrumental music with great riffs and great heaviness. It's a lot of fun, so I put that on my list. Number 47 is Shan's Omen. This is more of a poppier record, perhaps, prog pop or symphonic pop or however you want to put it. I put them in the similar category as Mir from a couple years back, who I actually awarded my favorite album of the year that year. But this is a great band as well, who just have a great quality, a great female lead singer, some really cool hooks and melodies, but not afraid to do a little bit in the prog realm also. It's not super proggy, but there's little touchstones, some synthesizer work, some, more interesting structures at times, but it does stay in a more poppy feel. But to me, it's just a beautiful album with great melodies and great performances once again. Definitely deserves to be on my list here. Number 46 is Vamusuri's album Moving Forward, which is a more recent find. I really love this record. It's another one that features a female vocalist who has a really interesting, almost jazzy musical style to her voice, and some really rocking sections. You know, there's some really high octane moments where the band just really jams out and has some fun proggy musical workouts. It's not too over the top proggy. It's more like hard rock, classic rock style with little prog undertones. But I feel as the album goes on and continues, especially in the second half, there's a bit more of that prog flourishes coming out in those different tracks, like The Archaeologist and the 2-part title track at the end. But it's just a lot of fun to listen to and has some great moments, some heartfelt singing and some great playing, high octane, great rocking moments, a little bit of maybe a Christian tinge to their lyrics, but I really enjoy everything that they're about. I think they're a promising new band in the scene, and I can't wait to see what they do in the future. Number 45 is Tesseract's album War of Being. This is probably the heaviest album on my list, perhaps. Definitely in contention for that. I don't typically like that heavy prog metal sound. You know, there's even quite a bit of growling and heavy vocals, you know, very menacing and dark. But I think it's blended really well on this record with some more groove type moments and some more beautiful, clean singing as well. You know, Daniel Tompkins gives one of the greatest vocal performances of the year on this thing. And even though the screaming parts and the harsher vocals don't really connect with me, as they never really are able to do, I can handle it because it's balanced well with a lot of other more smooth singing and a lot of cool grooves in the bass lines and some cool moments melodically. I like the connectors between the tracks, and they really allow these songs to have a lot of space as they move from one thing to the next. And there's just so many great moments. It's epic in scope, and it's just super well done, and I couldn't deny it a spot, at least somewhere on my top 50 list. Number 44 is the only album on here that I actually haven't done any kind of review for, even one of my mini reviews in one of these recap shows. I talked about it a little bit on my New Music Weekly just this past week, but it's the 20 Committee and their album The Cycle Undone. Just a fantastic late release record coming out December 12th, just right under the gun to make it right onto my list here at number 44. It has a little bit of a quality of like a Neil Morse, I think, in the melodies, how they focus on melodies, but with a lot of little cool prog flourishes in the instrumental sections, but a bit of like a jazz fusion kind of style also. I believe Chick Corea is cited as a heavy influence on the group, and you can hear that in some of these more jazz fusion type instrumental workouts. The lead singer really has a beautiful voice and a great vocal tone. Annie Haslam guests on a track, and it's wonderful to hear her voice in the mix. Has this kind of darker sci-fi tinge to the storyline and the lyrics. It's like a concept record, and it's just a lot of fun. I really enjoy this record, and it's probably going to rise up on my list as I hear it more. It's just so new, it's hard to place it where it should go on this list, but it's definitely in the top 50, if not rising up a bit more in the rankings as I listen to it more and more throughout the upcoming months and such. Number 43 is Lars Fredrik Frosli and the album Fire for to Linger. This is the keyboardist of Wobbler, doing a very retro-sounding album in his native tongue. Just really harkens back to the classic progressive music. He does a lot of those old-school keyboard instruments, you know, bringing these classic sounds. It's these lengthy tracks. Each track basically tells a different story, and it's really expressive, and there's lots of fireworks instrumentally, a lot of great keyboard moments, and Lars Fredrik Frosli puts it all out there for everyone to see. So really an excellent record. Really satiated my appetite for new Wobbler music, and I thought it was just a great showcase for an incredible artist, Lars Fredrik Frosli. Number 42 is a kind of an interesting one. HMLTD and the album The Worm. I thought this was really fascinating to listen to. One of my fellow prog YouTuber friends introduced this to me, and it's a really weird concept album, maybe done more in like an indie prog style, or I thought to like those bands like Black Midi and Black Country New Road, has sort of that aesthetic to it, a lot of different elements of, telling this bizarre little tale that they do throughout the track listing, and there's just a lot of interesting moments. I was really captivated by a lot of the storytelling here, and it's just a unique record. I like records that come out and just are unclassifiable or just different and out there, but still sound pristine. You could even hear a little bit of like a Pink Floyd style, like especially from The Wall or something like that, into the mix, but a lot of this quirky avant prog type stuff also. But it's really interesting and has some great moments, so well worth checking out. Number 41 is another newer release that I'm still trying to decide where it slots in, but I've been really loving it. It's Rubber Tea and their album From a Fading World. And this is like a concept record as well that has a cool blend of jazz and psych and some prog flourishes, and it has a female vocalist who has a very jazzy style to her singing, and it goes through a lot of different landscapes and feels throughout the record. It's just a beautiful listen. I thought it was captivating all the way through. There's some cool Spanish guitar sections. It's just a really great listen and breezes by quickly, and every track has something to grab hold of your ears, and it's nothing too heavy or dark. It's very light and breezy as it follows through these different track listing, but I really enjoyed the record. I thought it was a really strong, cool new prog record that I hadn't heard of. I had never heard of this band before, so it was a cool little surprise that came out this year. All right, getting into our top 40 here. Number 40 is Solstice and their album Light Up. This came out very early in the year. In fact, I think a lot of people probably received this last year at the end of the year. But for me, I didn't hear this till January of this year. And it's a beautiful classic symphonic prog record with great female vocals once again. Have a lot of female vocal-led prog here, which is really cool to me. I really love female vocals in prog. So incredible vocalist, more of a folky style perhaps, but a lot of bright, interesting melodies. I feel like the first half of the record is more lighter and fun and bouncy and positive, and then the second half of the record is more slow, melodic, more brooding, more thoughtful, has these slower, more ballad type sections, but it's also beautiful and well played, and there's a lot of violin work that's really well done and leads to that folky kind of flavor, but a wonderful record, well worth checking into. Number 39 is Einar Solberg's solo record 16, of course the frontman of Leprous, and he's just a fantastic singer. His voice has a range unlike anyone else that I hear in the modern prog scene, and he puts it on full display on this solo record that can feel a bit more subdued and contemplative, but he always brings the power in some of these bigger emotional moments. It's a lot like some of the more recent Leprous albums, and even adds a bit of electronica in the mix. There's even a rapped style section in one of the tracks, but he always brings that epic power that his voice can bring, and there's a lot of emotional weight and heft to these tracks, and you could tell it's a very personal project to Einar Solberg. He's just an amazing musician, and these compositions really touched me, and I thought this was a fabulous record. So at number 38, Peter Gabriel's I.O., which is probably a little bit low on my list, but I'm not as into his solo material as a lot of people seem to be, but I really respect this album. I think it's fantastically constructed. I think he knocked it out of the park in this sort of art rock, art pop style that he's known for. He's clearly an artist. He's a brilliant musician, and he's crafted an album that just sounds meticulously put together, great production values. There's 2 different mixes to the album that both sound fantastic. These songs are just captivating. You could tell they're personal and emotional to him and his experiences, and they have great melodies, and I keep returning back to it. It's another record that's very fresh and right off the table here in December, and it's hard to rank it amongst these other albums that I've had for longer, so this could very well rise up the ranks also, but I definitely want it to be a part of this top 50, and so here it is at number 38, Peter Gabriel's I.O. Number 37 is Tritop and the album Rise of Cassandra. I really love this record. This is a symphonic prog album. I believe it's an Italian group that do this like Spock's Beardian, Flower Kings type style symphonic prog, right up my alley, right in my wheelhouse of what I love in prog. Very fun music. They jam out in a lot of extended proggy instrumental sections. It does harken very closely back to some other notable influences. You know, you could say they wear their influences on their sleeves. There's certain songs that sound very close to the original artist that they're definitely emulating, but I think they bring their own style to it. They bring their own spirit, and they're just a promising young band, and I really enjoyed their record. It's bookended by these two bigger epics and these shorter songs in the middle, but they're all fun to listen to and have some great instrumental playing. They're obviously very proficient. I can't wait to see what they do next. If they're this talented right out of the gate, it'd be interesting to see what their next project will entail. Number 36, Mondo Drag, and the album Through the Hourglass. This is very much in the Pink Floyd family. Very, very cool extended passages to this. In fact, there's a song called Passages, which is just this long extended instrumental that gets this cool jam session, and they get more intense as the track moves along. It starts more atmospheric, but then we get into like full-on rock explosion by the end of it. But the whole album is just really brilliant. It rose quite high up the rankings as I was re-listening to this album. It was initially quite low, but the more I listen to it, the more I love it, and really love what they're doing in this lane, this cool, more space, psychedelic rock stuff. They're doing it expertly well. It's a great sounding album, and I love just jamming along to this one and just grooving out to some of these more laid back sections that they really give their time and space to. It's really cool. Number 35 is Subsignals, A Poetry of Rain. This is neo-prog, but with dashes of AOR and dashes of maybe even a little hints of prog metal, but it all culminates in a beautiful sound. I love the vocals are just fantastic on this record. The guitar tone is really crisp and clean and clear. It's really well produced and just sounds fantastic. I just really love everything about it. I think it's a great blend of styles. They never sacrifice the melody. It seems like it's melody first. There's not a lot of like proggy showy offness, if that's a word. They don't show off on their instruments a ton here. They're more about the melody and crafting good songs, which I think plays in their favor, and it just makes for a really beautiful listen through, and I enjoyed this from front to back. A really great record. Number 34 is Bend the Future's Sound So Wrong, and this is more in the jazz family. There's a lot of instrumental playing to this one. I believe the opening and closing tracks feature vocals, but everything in between is just basically instrumental and focuses on this very jazzy style of prog, but I hear little hints of like Porcupine Tree in that mix as well, and I think they're just a really interesting younger band, once again doing some interesting things in the prog realm, but leaning heavy into that jazzier direction that I think really works for them. It's just a really cool record. They're great at their instruments. They give every instrument a chance to shine in its own way. There's some cool solos throughout in this jazzier style, so really cool record. Definitely worth checking out if you haven't heard that one yet. Number 33 is the Flower Kings, Look at You Now. Flower Kings are always a staple of my lists because I love what they do. They're one of my all-time favorite groups. I was slightly disappointed by Look at You Now. Usually Flower Kings is like a shoo-in to my top 16, but this album didn't connect with me quite as much as some of the more recent Flower Kings records have, but it's still brilliant. It's still them doing what they do best. It's a lot of shorter tracks. Maybe you can say they hang together almost as a suite throughout the album, but really it's like these cool little prog vignettes, one song after the next, and they all have something cool and interesting about them. There's some instrumentals that show off their symphonic prog chops. It's really focused on Roine Stolt and his writing. He's doing a lot of the keyboard work as well. And so it's a really cool showcase of his talents, and there's some cool moments, and I really like the final run of tracks, the last like 3 or 4 tracks I think are super strong, even if the middle drags a little bit in my mind, but it's still a solid Flower Kings record. They don't make a bad record, so it still deserves a spot on my list here. Number 32 is Press to Enters from Mirror to Road. Fantastic new prog metal. This is a debut record, bringing a bit of like a synth pop sound into prog metal with female vocals, and it's a great mix. It's a beautiful record that showcases young talent. I love the catchiness of it. There's some cool hooks, but the band is able to shine at the same time with some really incredible playing. I love some of those like arpeggiated bass lines that they do in quick succession. There's some cool guitar runs. There's some cool playing all the way around, and just grounded by these great poppy female vocals that really steer the ship in a really fun way. So that was a fun record to get into this year. Number 31 is Cyan's Pictures from the Other Side. Cyan's a project from Rob Reed. Basically, this is a reimagining of an album that he made back in the early 90s, but now with a new lineup, with Peter Jones on vocals. And it's a fantastic record, just like their previous one was really well done as well for King and Country. But this one has a great epic at the end of it, Nosferatu, that I really enjoyed, bringing a bit of that darker edge to their sound. But mostly it's very light, very fun, focused on melodies. Maybe the middle of the album focuses a little too much on these kind of lighter ballad-esque type songs, and I'm looking for a bit more prog energy, but then you get it in that final epic, and it makes up for it. So it's a really cool album, and the vocals are fantastic. Peter Jones is one of my favorite modern prog vocalists, and it just sounds really pristine, and so well done record by a great group. Number 30 is Ice Age's Waves of Loss and Power. Ice Age came back after somewhat of a hiatus. They're a prog metal band, more in that classic vein. It's kind of like if you cross Dream Theater with Styx, perhaps, is a good reference point, because the vocalist sounds a lot like the vocalist from Styx, so a lot of that same energy. There's some really cool tracks on here, a lot of extended pieces. I found it interesting that some of these tracks are like continuations from tracks from prior albums, so they're continuing these epics forward, but they're all really done well. I love the track River Flow, which I think brings this Spock Spirit energy into this prog metal format. But it's just a really fun album to listen to. The band is just really on fire with this release, the best thing that they've come up with, and this is well recommended. It's a really cool prog metal album. If you haven't heard it, it's definitely worth checking out and enjoying in that old school kind of Dream Theater type mold. Next, at number 29, we have Yes's Mirror to the Sky. Yes came out with a corker of an album this year. I thought it's their best in a little while here. I thought it was a step up from The Quest, a bit more energy, has some really cool tracks on it. I love the title track and all the orchestration that's put into it to give it that luscious symphonic sound. I love when Yes includes an orchestra into their sound. And it's just, if you just look at the main album and those main tracks, it's just a really tight, good Yes album with some really cool songs. I love the opening track, and I love Luminosity. There's just some cool moments. They really have come into their own with this new lineup. I know there's some controversy of like, is this the real Yes? And if it doesn't have certain members who are pretty important to Yes history, but I don't really ascribe to those things. I just listened to the music and had a good time with this one. I think it's a strong Yes album, and I really enjoyed listening to it this year. At number 28, Dee Virgilio, Morrison Jennings with their album Sophomore. And of course, these are three luminaries in the modern prog scene. I love these guys and the music they create together. Them doing more of a folk rock style, more in the lines of Crosby, Stills, and Nash. But it's beautifully done with great harmonies and great acoustic playing. They experiment slightly on this one with some rockier sounds like on Mama, but by and large stick to the same formula as Troika before it. And I love it. It's a beautiful album. In terms of how much I've listened and played this, it probably should be much higher on the list, but since I tend to prefer the more proggier material from these guys and from other bands, I feel like it's deserving of this spot. It definitely deserves to be on my list because I really enjoyed it and think it's well written and well crafted, but it doesn't reach the heights of some of the big prog material that I just tend to prefer. Number 27 is Geese with 3D Country. Maybe a little bit of a swerve in a different direction, but I just really love this record. I think it's brilliantly conceived. It's sort of like the American version of like those Black Country New Road, Black Midi type bands, that post-punk scene, but with a lot of prog in the mix as well. But done in an Americana type style. I believe these guys are from like New York, and they bring this like classic rock, Southern country rock aesthetic and swagger to their music. It almost sounds like if the Rolling Stones went prog, and there's just so many cool, catchy moments. The vocalist is just a really fun singer who has this kind of deep, interesting voice, and I love hearing new, young musicians doing something a little outside of the box, and that's what I felt with this release. Just a really cool listen through, and has some great, fun times on it. Just some really catchy melodies, but they put plenty of little prog quirk into it as well to make it interesting. Number 26 is The Anchor It, and It All Began With Loneliness. Fantastic debut prog metal album. Can tend to be on the heavier end as well, but they don't really delve too much into like the growling, screaming style vocals, but they'll get into a little bit of like the blast beats and some of the heavier, more intense stuff, but I think it works in their musical palette. But what really drew me to them is utilizing different instruments. Like there's some flute, there's some saxophone playing throughout here. Andy Tillison plays a lot of keyboards to bring a bit of a prog touch to this record, and it just culminates in an excellent debut. Probably deserves to be even higher on the list, but I settled on it here because it's just a fabulous record. Showcases a lot of talent and a lot of promise for another new young project, and I hope they continue and make more cool records like this. It's just really fun, and I've really enjoyed listening to this one. Great group, great album, definitely worth your time. Number 25 is Seven Impales Summit. This is a group that does more of a classic prog style, maybe more in the lane of like a King Crimson or Vandergraaf Generator. A lot of darkness and doom, but you get a lot of these cool horn breaks and a lot of this jammier type moments, and a really eclectic, different kind of singer who has his own style to him. It's a really cool mix and blend of different prog styles that I think comes together fantastically well on this release. There's like 4 tracks. They're all pretty lengthy and go through a lot of different styles and moods, and, still stays grounded in this darker prog type stuff like Vandergraaf, and I think it's really done expertly well. Another case in favor of like the Norwegian prog and what they're doing over there. Now we get into number 24, which is Neil Morse's The Dreamer, Joseph Part 1. I'm admittedly not a big fan of his more musical style. I don't really care that much for Jesus Christ the Exorcist. I respect it and what he's trying to do there, and I was worried this was going to be more of that kind of thing, more of like a stage musical type feel, but I think it's balanced really well as just being a cool concept rock album. There's definitely elements of that musical theater style and different vocalists playing different parts and such, but I think it's grounded in just some really great rock music with some little prog undertones, especially in like the overture and things like that. But I think he sticks more in this kind of bluesy rock vein throughout this album, and it really ended up being really fun to listen to and surprisingly good, and I'm excited for part 2 to come out next year. So this was a solid release, and I think Neil Morse really hit it out of the park here with something a little bit different than we're used to with his Neil Morse band stuff. A little bit more bluesy and rockier, a little bit leaning into that musical type style, and a little bit lighter on the prog, but there's moments enough to satisfy the prog fans, and a cool concept telling that story of Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat and all of that. And we'll get into part 2 next year, where I'll definitely be speaking about that part of the album. And we'll see if how I feel about that record changes how I feel about this part 1, and maybe it'll move on my rankings here a little bit. We'll see. Number 23 is Earthside's Let the Truth Speak. This is another recent release from November. Excellent album by Earthside. This is another one I considered for my top 16, but it's a fabulous record, very cinematic in its scope. The band just has this clear vision of this big scale, and everything has this epic quality to it, and it's really well done. There's all these guest singers who all do fantastic, but they also have these instrumental moments where the players are just allowed to stand out. There's some cool orchestration to give this that epic cinematic feel. Has this extended instrumental at the end, which really plays out in an epic way. It makes you think of these like really big, high concept, like sci-fi apocalyptic kind of scenarios, I think. And there's a cool jazzier song in the middle that I think is just a cool different style to them that has almost a funk groove combined with their prog metal style. So just all in all, a really fabulous record, and showcases a band at the top of their talents who are doing supremely creative things, and I hope they continue in this vein. This is a fabulous record. We're getting into some of the best records that were hard to not put into my top 16. Next at 22 is Dream the Electric Sleep and their album American Mystic. This is a fabulous record, once again. More in the rock vein, a little less proggy, but definitely has prog flourishes to it, and they're able to rock out in a great way, but really focused on melody and these really cool songs that captivate and really were catchy and fun and memorable to me. I really love all that they do. There's almost a little bit of like a Jellyfish power pop type style to them in drips and drabs, but overall it's more of this cool rock type sound with little prog flourishes that I just really loved, with great melodies, great songs, great singing, and it just was one on regular rotation for me this year. Just a really great record that I kept returning back to. At number 21, I have Zop and their album Dominion. Zop is like a Canterbury symphonic prog band. They definitely have that Canterbury leaning. I believe their prior album was much more in that Canterbury style and was instrumental mostly. This one has a little bit of vocals onto it and adds a bit of a symphonic style to widen the sound palette just a little bit, and I think it plays in its favor. This is better than their previous record and has some fabulous songs on it, some extended instrumentals, some cool sections where they're really leaning into their prog roots, but definitely retains that Canterbury, almost jazzy type feel at times as well. And so it's a cool blend, a cool stew of prog music that harkens maybe more back to like the classic era and really celebrates that style from the late 60s, early 70s. Really fabulous and definitely well worth checking out for any classic prog fan. Number 20 is Mystery and their album Redemption. I felt like they really knocked it out of the park with this one. They're a band that really has their own lane, their own style, this neo-prog type style, but done really expertly well with emotional vocals and just beautiful, great writing with some interesting concepts in their songs. There's a great extended epic piece at the end of the album, but it's just done in that beautiful style that I love, that classic neo-prog, symphonic prog style. They're excellent musicians. It sounds pristine. No note is out of place. And every song has something interesting and different about it that's well worth listening and looking into. But what really takes the cake with this one is just the emotional impact. The vocalist really is able to convey the emotions of these songs, and the instrumentalists as well. Some of these really beautiful extended guitar solos and things like that are just so beautifully done and really expertly tell the stories that they're trying to tell with these tracks. So definitely check that out. It's a beautiful release by a fabulous modern prog band from Canada. Number 19 is Unitopia's Seven Chambers. The return of Unitopia was a surprise for me this year. I'm really glad they came back. And this record really knocked me off my feet when I first heard it. I thought it was fabulous. It's a long record. It has a lot of these more lengthy pieces to it, but they go off into a lot of different styles and directions as they're known to do. But all grounded by wonderful vocals and great playing all around. Steve Unruh really shows his presence on this record on some great flute and violin work. It has an epic at the end, The Uncertain. That's one of my favorite epics of the year. Fabulously done. Maybe the album's a bit overlong in retrospect. You know, it does feel its length a little bit, but every track is interesting and different and captivating. It's somewhat of a concept album about like some of the ailments that the band members have gone through, and you know, each track is kind of about a different medical condition or something along those lines, and talking about getting older in years and how these conditions can come upon you and alter your life in different ways, but trying to gain the right perspective despite these setbacks. And I just thought it was a cool concept for an older band and them experimenting with a lot of different interesting musical styles, and created a great record for them. So just happy to have them back. Number 18, Crown Lands and the album Fearless. Fantastic fantastic duo from Canada who sound a lot like Rush. You know, that's definitely the touchstone here. They even have an epic at the beginning that sounds like it could be taken straight from Hemispheres. You know, it's a beautiful, epic piece of music that leans into their Rush influence. But throughout the record, they're able to shine on their own 2 feet as well. Their own 4 feet, I suppose, since there's 2 band members. And it's just a fabulous record with some cool classic rock touchstones from like Led Zeppelin and like that classic Rush sound, but definitely are able to have these expanded pieces to bring a bit more prog flavor to the table. And they're a lot along the lines of like a Greta Van Fleet, but I think done more in a prog vein and a little bit more in that Rush style, whereas Greta Van Fleet are definitely leaning towards the Led Zeppelin side of the equation. So for me and my taste, this tends to lean more into what I like, and it's just a fabulous record with some great riffs, some great melodies, some cool instrumental passages. And for 2 guys to be doing all of this, just the 2 of them, is absolutely incredible. Watching them live and pulling this stuff off as a duo is next level. So definitely a group to watch out for, and one of my favorite records this year. And then just barely missing my top 16 tournament at number 17 is Ocrust and their album The Approbation, another fantastic prog debut record. This is prog metal, definitely along the lines of Porcupine Tree and Opeth, another band that really wears its influences on its sleeve. At times in the record, you could definitely hear those Opeth touchstones. There's even a couple tracks with some growling vocals. Definitely hear the Porcupine Tree influence, especially in the last final epic track. Just really cool group, though. They recorded this album like in a cabin out in the middle of nowhere, and you can feel that in the music. It feels like a cool concept, feels warm and inviting in that way, has like some sounds and things you hear from the cabin itself that really bring a character to the release. And I'm just excited to see what they come up with next. Maybe they leaned a little bit heavy on their influences here, and it'd be fun to see them branch out into something a bit more unique and different. But when it sounds this great and when they're able to pull it off this well, I'm going to be there regardless. And I think this is a fabulous record. Definitely recommended to all fans of the bands I mentioned, Porcupine Tree, Opeth. Definitely a must listen. So that is my list of albums. Quite a lengthy list. Sorry that the show's a bit longer, but hopefully that kept your interest throughout. And there's some good records to check out, or you can tell me if any of these stood out to you, or if they make your list, or how you feel about my ranking. And remember, it's all just my personal opinion. I'm not saying this is objectively how these albums should rank. I know many of you will be like, oh, I would put that so much higher, or oh, I wouldn't have that on my list at all. Well, this is just how I felt listening to these records and how they stacked up in my personal tastes and opinions. So thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully you'll continue onward to next week's video where I talk about my top 16 records. That's going to be a lot of fun. You can kind of try to piece together which records I didn't mention yet that are probably part of that 16. Some, in fact, are probably on the wall behind me, just to give you a little bit of a hint. But it should be a fun show. I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope you guys are out there enjoying the music. Thank you guys, everybody. I'll see you in a future episode. Bye.